Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
This message comes from Greenlight. Ready to start talking to your kids about financial literacy? Meet Greenlight, the debit card and money app that teaches kids and teens how to earn, save, spend wisely, and invest with your guardrails in place. With Greenlight, you can send money to kids quickly, set up chores, automate allowance, and keep an eye on your kids' spending with real-time notifications. Join millions of parents and kids building healthy financial habits together on Greenlight. Get started risk-free at greenlight.com/audio.
This is Scott Campbell from the Stupid Things for Love podcast. I have a 7-year-old son, and the biggest mountain I climb every day is trying to put shoes on this child. And I'm so grateful to Skechers for making the only shoes my son will willingly put on by himself. Their slip-ons are amazing, and he doesn't have to deal with laces. He doesn't have to deal with anything. They come in the perfect color blue. Thank you, Skechers, the comfort technology company. And you can find Skechers everywhere. Skechers.com, a Skechers store, or wherever stylish footwear is sold.
Hi folks, Ronnie here from Life Change Tea. There's a lot of hubbub about the ramifications of GMOs. First of all, what are GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Yee! Man-made organisms entering our body, changing and damaging us from the inside out. What's our defense? First of all, not eating them. Second, cleansing from them when we do eat them. Thank God for Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea cleanses from toxins, heavy metals, and helps flush GMOs out of your body. Our unique blend of herbs help cleanse you from the inside out, helping you feel refreshed and clean of yee. We also carry unique one-of-a-kind supplements. So order online at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Rid yourself of the yee that contaminates your food and water. Go to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Get the Tea, your best defense.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. You can find a link to my work at emailrevealer.com. If you need any kind of asset searches, locates, adoption investigations, emailrevealer.com. This show is brought to you by getthetea.com, Life Change Tea. I've been on this tea now, coming on 3 weeks. I lost about 15 pounds. I'm out high. I forgot to drink the tea yesterday, and I can definitely tell the difference. You drink this tea early in the morning, it gives you energy, helps you lose weight, helps you with digestion, it's helping me with my complexion. Getthetea.com. I cannot recommend this enough. Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. We got a legend, a legendary guest, Wayne Madsen. You could find his work at WadeMadsenReport.com. He's written a book, The Almost Classified Guide to CIA Front Companies. Wayne Madsen, are you there?
I am here.
It's great to have you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself for people who don't know? Who is Wayne Madsen?
Well, I've been doing investigative journalism here for, I guess since the early 90s. I had intended to go into journalism as a profession back in high school when I worked for my high school newspaper, but something called Vietnam was still going on. So Nixon got rid of the college deferments. I was very much draft eligible. And so I joined the Navy ROTC program and wound up spending about 10 years on active duty. after graduating. And so needless to say, my journalism career was somewhat delayed. But I managed to get involved in journalism, first working in the for high tech publications, and then going on to more political issues.
Okay, and I heard also you worked for the NSA for a while?
Yeah, my last duty in the Navy was at National Security Agency at Fort Meade, Maryland. And then I did contracting work for NSA while working as an engineer for the late great RCA Corporation. Doesn't exist anymore. It got eaten up by General Electric. So I had a brief time with that particular part of intelligence. But in the Navy, I also worked in intelligence having to do with anti-submarine warfare.
Yeah, imagine that, RCA. When I was a kid, it was like so huge, and like every TV was RCA, now it's just gone, right? Just amazing how things change,
It was a company, unfortunately, it didn't keep up with the times. They own so many patents, many of which now, of course, the rights were sold off to others. But it was basically RCA, where color television was invented, modern radio was invented. Dave Sarnoff, the chairman and RCA, worked with Thomas Edison back in the day. So, but a couple of bad business decisions they made them quite vulnerable to a takeover by GE, which of course took place.
Well, you contacted me recently. You sent me a lengthy email, and I guess it's from this article, Welcome to Waterbury, the city that holds secrets that could bring down Trump, that you wrote along with Andrew Krieg.
Yes. We had the opportunity to pursue a lead based on a lawsuit that was filed first in California and then in New York by a woman named Katie Johnson, who alleged that in 1994, she was 13 at the time, that she and a girl named, who she identified as Maria, who was 12 years old at the time, were sodomized by Donald Trump and his friend Jeffrey Epstein at Epstein's townhouse in Midtown Manhattan. And of course, Katie Johnson was supposed to provide more details just prior to the election. There was a news conference scheduled in Los Angeles, but at the very last minute, she dropped those plans, citing personal threats against her and members of her family. At that point in time, U.S. Judge Ronnie Abrams from the Southern District of New York had scheduled an in-courtroom conference between Katie Johnson, her attorney, and ordered Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein to be there at that conference. That was scheduled for December 16th, 2016. Ironically, the very day the Electoral College met to confirm Trump as the president. That never took place. But in the lawsuit, there's a reference to a girl named Maria. When no other information was given, I was contacted by somebody who was an interlocutor for Maria, who said, look, Maria is alive, and gave me some additional information that Andy Craig, myself, decided to pursue by going to Waterbury. The most interesting aspect of Maria's story is that she was kidnapped from Waterbury in 1993, a year before this alleged rape by Trump and Epstein took place in Manhattan. She was actually abducted when she was 11 years old, and obviously wound up in the hands of traffickers who traffic in children for purposes of sex. And so that opened up a rather unbelievable can of worms. I mean, we're talking not about some itinerant person who preyed on children, in this case, the President of the United States.
Now, you say you were contacted with information about Maria. How did this information come to you? By email, through letter, phone call?
Yeah, by email. I get a lot of that stuff, and you probably understand this more than anyone else. A lot of it is you almost have to do a triage on it. Some of it obviously is bogus and far out, and I immediately discard it. Then there's that kind of gray area where you're not really sure, but you won't jump on it right away. Maybe put it off to look at it later, but you're not going to immediately discard it until you check. And then there's that which there's information which you have to take seriously, and I don't get a lot of that. But in this case, what I had received was so convincing. I decided to make plans to head to Waterbury, Connecticut as soon as I possibly could.
And the email was a relative of Maria?
Not a relative, but somebody who had been interested in who Maria was, based on this lawsuit from by Katie Johnson, because the implication in the lawsuit was that Trump told Katie Johnson that if she ever spoke to anyone, family or anyone else, about what had happened in this incident in New York in 1994, she would wind up like Maria. The implication being that, Maria had been, done away with.
Right.
And that was my belief. But it's actually, for purposes of investigating this incident, it was fortuitous that Maria was still alive, because if she had been killed, for example, and her body had been discarded somewhere, you really don't have much to go on as far as, you'd have to go with, witnesses, and, a cold murder case is an awful lot harder to look into than a case where somebody is still alive and is willing to talk to people about what happened.
So this tipster gave you Maria's full name and address, phone number, that kind of information?
No, because Maria had the same issue, apparently, that Katie Johnson had. At one point in time, there were individuals who were associated with Trump who discovered who she was and that she was still alive, and started doing things. And this is a term that I didn't even know about until about a year ago, doxing. They began doxing her to try to get, documents about her identity and where she lived, to make threats against her. The same thing that was done to Katie Johnson was done to this individual. And I've agreed with the person who made me aware of this story, that, we would protect her identity just as Katie Johnson's attorneys have protected hers. By the way, Katie Johnson is not her real name either. She was originally known as Jane Doe in the lawsuit, and then we discovered through her media contacts that she was using the name Katie Johnson. Both these girls have good reason to protect their identity, because when you're dealing with thugs like Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's personal lawyer, we know what he or a representative of him did with Stormy Daniels at the fitness center in Las Vegas, where she was threatened. Somebody said, "That's a nice looking girl you have. It'd be a shame if something happened to her mother." Well, this kind of stuff apparently took place with these two girls as well.
Yeah, I would even go one further than that. If you look at Donald Trump's relationship with Eric Prince, the head of Blackwater, has a lawsuit right now where he's accused of several murders, and the judge is allowing witnesses against him to be anonymous.
Not only that, but he appoints Eric Prince's sister, Betsy DeVos, to be the Secretary of Education.
I know.
And in addition, we have another person in the Trump cabinet who's problematic. Alex Acosta was the U.S. attorney in the Southern District of Florida who arranged that nice sweetheart deal for Jeffrey Epstein back in 2006, whereby he pleaded guilty to one count of soliciting sex from an underage girl and was able to actually spend time in the Palm Beach County stockade, the prison there, but only at night. He could leave during the day, and he was even able to fly down to his pedophile lair at Little St. James Island in the U.S. Virgin Islands. So we have two people in the Trump cabinet, Acosta, who apparently was rewarded because of what he did for Epstein by being given the job as Secretary of Labor. Of course, that gets him in the cabinet.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
And keeps him silent about the deal that was worked out with Epstein. So there's many, many connections to Jeffrey Epstein with Donald Trump.
Back to Maria, though. Now, were you supplied her name? Did you attempt to call her up and make contact with her?
No, I've been respecting the person she's been working with, and eventually I would like to try to speak to her, but we're not talking about people like Stormy Daniels, who apparently has done pretty well in the adult film industry, and we're talking about people who don't have much money, who have a lot to lose, but they don't really have anything anyway. So I've been very cognizant of that fact and been trying to respect it. I'm hoping at some point in time, because Maria had some contact with the media that didn't turn out all that well, that she'll regain some trust with at least two people in the media who would not work against her interests.
Okay, if you want to put her in touch with a lawyer, to possibly help her out, I actually I work with the lawyer who was behind Stormy Daniels, the original lawyer, Keith Davidson. If you want to, he's right up his alley. Okay, if you want to get a hold of me on that.
Yeah. The other thing, of course, I'm cognizant about is she was a minor when this alleged assault took place. So, I'm trying to deal with that, knowing full well that, the privacy concerns of someone who happened to as a minor are a little bit different than a woman, an adult who was raped. At some point in time, hopefully she'll regain confidence in the system. The system hasn't done much to help her so far. I mean, talking about the system, the legal system, and if you're in a place like hers, very vulnerable. You're dealing with the other end of this is the president of the United States, who can marshal every resource at his disposal. And I never thought I'd work on a story like this. And in other cases, I've had the whistleblower, has come directly to me. But this one is not. It's a normal run-of-the-mill investigation.
Did you try and verify this through Tom Mayer or Cheney Mason or through Katie Doe or Tiffany Doe, through them?
I've been in touch with people who have had contact with some of the individuals, but the Maria part of this, Maria has not had anything to do with Katie Johnson angle or the Tiffany Doe angle. It's been more of a direct contact with the persons who've been in touch with me.
And you connected this to a kidnapping or an abduction that took place in Waterbury, Connecticut.
Yeah, 1993. March 93. This 11-year-old at the time was snatched from the street. It's still an open case in Waterbury. They still have Maria listed as missing. When we first went up to Waterbury and started to inquire with the police department, even trying to get the original police report was like trying to pull teeth. The reception was somewhat hostile, to say the least. We tried to explain to some of the parties in Waterbury that, we had information that was pertinent to the cold case. And I, at the time, had not realized that Waterbury had this really disturbing history where they had a mayor back in 2000 named Phil Giordano, who was a Republican. He actually ran for the U.S. Senate in 2000 against Joe Lieberman.
Oh, boy.
He was the Republican candidate, but Giordano was arrested by the FBI. The FBI was in Waterbury doing a regular public corruption investigation and discovered that Giordano was having sex with underage kids. In two cases, a girl 8 years old and her cousin who was 10 years old in the mayor's office in a few cases. And Giordano was arrested, and he's doing 37 years in federal penitentiary in Tucson, Arizona. But the amazing thing is the police chief at the time, O'Leary is his name, is now the mayor of Waterbury.
Interesting.
And what's interesting really is it was the FBI that came in and identified Mayor Giordano as a pedophile. And how was it that the feds could figure that out, and the local police that had daily contact with this guy had no idea what was going on? And it appears that Waterbury, because it has a significant and very poor Puerto Rican community, has also been plagued by trafficking of children for sex purposes, almost like a stabling operation, if you will, because of the poverty in this basically gutted out old industrial town where they used to make their money making clocks and brass. So the town has secrets, and coming in there with new information that one of the abductees, one of the children abducted, may have been raped by the President of the United States, didn't basically endear us to the town fathers.
Just to get a little background, what is the population of the town of Waterbury? Roughly.
Oh, I think it's probably about 120,000.
Oh, I think the whole state of Connecticut is only 100,000 people.
Yeah.
Connecticut's a very small population. But now, and what about the number of the police department? Any idea of how big the police department is in Waterbury?
Yeah, I think it's probably about 120.
Really? Okay. And now, if Maria's still alive and this is an open case, she's never contacted them to say, "Hey, close the case. I'm okay."
No, she. The circumstances of her abduction are rather strange. She was one of 10 siblings.
Okay.
After we finally got the police report, I got to say they didn't do a very good job of redacting it because I've had some experience with taking redacted reports and holding them up to a fluorescent light. You can actually read some of the words underneath the black marker redactions, and I was able to discover by doing that according to one witness, obviously the police didn't want me to know this, but I discovered it anyway, that there was a guy, the last guy seen talking to this girl was a person known in the neighborhood as Papito, which means little daddy,
right,
in English. And this guy had an alibi that he was in New York that day with his family, that he wasn't in Waterbury. And but it doesn't give the last name of the guy, but it doesn't give the actual last name of the guy, but it mentions that he was a native of Colombia. Now, he's in primarily a Puerto Rican neighborhood, so there's already something stinks with this story. There's a very significant drug problem in Waterbury. There was then, and there still is. And when you say Colombian national, and you got a town with a significant drug problem, it's not hard to figure out that this guy was not on the up and up. And he's the last guy seen with this young girl. And he says he was with his family in New York City. And this, of course, ultimately is where Maria's trafficked and winds up in Epstein's townhouse. We discovered this information. We made it all available to the Waterbury the city attorney's office, and the police department obviously has it. But there doesn't seem to be any interest in pursuing this. Now, there's a statute of limitations as well. So there has been a move to drop the statute of limitations for child sex trafficking, but none of these federal efforts were grandfathered. So we can't get the perpetrators on the actual original crime. I mean, it's not like murder, which is a capital crime and there's a statute. So,
do we know who tipped the FBI off about this mayor being involved in this?
Well, they were actually wiretapping Giordano. You're talking about the original case with Giordano?
Yeah, because you said the local police weren't investigating; they were overlooking it. Who tipped off the FBI? How'd the FBI get involved in it?
Well, the FBI was originally investigating Giordano for corruption. He was receiving illegal bribes. So they were conducting their normal Title III wiretapping, court-ordered wiretapping on Giordano when they found out he was making arrangements with this Puerto Rican prostitute to have her deliver her own daughter and niece to the mayor's office. Now, this is back in 2000. So the FBI obviously must have a significant file history on the city of Waterbury. Now, in the case of Maria, at the time, it should have been an investigation because she was trafficked across state lines, which would automatically bring the FBI. And sometimes you don't need that. The FBI will get involved in a child kidnapping even when there's no evidence of interstate travel or abduction. But this whole story would be probably written off as, just the kid got kidnapped, from a poor neighborhood. But the connection to Donald Trump is the reason why I got involved in it.
Okay, let's take a little commercial break, and we'll be back right after these messages. The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com. Subhash Technosis is a search engine optimization and website design company. They're located in India, so you're going to save a lot of money and get top quality service. They offer all sorts of business process outsourcing, data entry, banking BPO services, recruitment process outsourcing, software testing, offshoring, research network, customer care, press release, content writing, and distribution. Now, I've personally worked with Subhash for over 10 years. This is the man that puts out my press releases. They've done work on my websites, so I can personally recommend SubhashTechnosis.com. Now, you can get a hold of Subhash Technosis by email at info@SubhashTechnosis.com. Their website is www.subhashtechnosis.com, and their Skype is ANUSHASUBASH. You can find a link to Subhash Technosis at OppermanReport.com and also awakeradio.us and much, much more. Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. Now, it says in the police report that she was trafficked to New York City?
It doesn't say that, but there's an implication that the last guy she was speaking to, this guy who's identified as Papito, a Colombian national, who said he wasn't there in Waterbury the day when the other witness said they saw him. Said he was with his family in New York that day, in New York City that day. So you got the last guy she's seen with.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
Using the name Little Daddy in a neighborhood plagued with drug problems, a Colombian national, and a link to New York City. A guy like Epstein wouldn't be dealing directly with kidnappers anyway. From what I understand is these kids, when they're abducted and they're trafficked, they're passed through various organizations. And in this case, you had a drug operation. The other thing we found out is that the mother of this girl waited a whole day to report this abduction to the police, which is also pretty suspicious. And one of the things I discovered talking to members of the family of this girl is that the mother may have had a drug debt herself, and that this kidnapping may have taken place to satisfy a drug debt. There's two references that I managed to also decipher in the police report, that there was a ransom mention, two monetary figures I read. One was $2,000, and the other one a real odd number, $1,960. So there was obviously some at some point in time a ransom demand. And that information came to the police from a teacher at Maria's elementary school.
Okay, so then there was a bit of an investigation into this missing kid. Was it on the TV? Was it on the news?
No. There was an investigation by the youth division of the Waterbury Police Department, and they assigned a couple of detectives. I mean, they conducted several interviews, but after a while, it just became a cold case.
Did the report list the teacher's name so you can contact her?
No, I couldn't read that. That was. They did a pretty good job at taking the marker to that.
Now, have you been able to contact the sisters or the mothers or anything like that of Maria?
Well, this is not the Ozzie and Harriet type family,
right,
by any stretch. The family, the parents had moved to Waterbury from Puerto Rico, and the father died a year before Maria was kidnapped. The mother remarried. So, as I said, there were 10 siblings, not all with the same, father. There was multiple, 2 fathers involved with this large family. And apparently Maria never did make any contact with that part of the family ever.
And do you know what the father died of?
That's not stated, no.
Okay, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, do we know of any
the mother is also deceased. She died back in I think she died in 2015.
Okay, and you're getting this from your source, or you've done searches on this and you've looked these people up?
Well, some of it came from people we spoke to in the community. It's very hard to penetrate the Puerto Rican community in Waterbury because of the drug problem. You get two Anglo white guys showing up in the town, and the immediate ideas were cops.
Right.
And so we really had to. It took several days to convince some people we were not police and we weren't trying to bust anybody for dealing in drugs or anything like that. We were just trying to get to the bottom of this abduction, this kidnapping.
And how many days did you stay down there?
I was there for a week.
Okay, a week. So you guys rented a motel, just hung out down there?
Yeah.
Okay, so you put a lot of work into this. It took a lot of now, any indication of any connection between Giordano, the mayor, and Trump? Any kind of building projects in Waterbury, anything like that?
Well, that's interesting, too. The mayor, Giordano, had married into a family, a construction family involved in construction business, where his ex-wife now, that marriage didn't last long after he was busted for pedophilia. Giordano had a business friend and father-in-law who lived in Long Island, had obvious ties to the mafia. And there was one link to construction interests, and including the mafia construction interests, including some which had built Trump's casinos in Atlantic City. And of course, Atlantic City, we know that Trump was friendly with mobsters there. Nicky Scarfo ran the mob out of Atlantic City in Philadelphia, who interestingly was sentenced to federal prison. He was in federal, I forget where he was actually in federal prison, but he died in the prison a week before Trump's inauguration of they said, congestive heart failure.
Really?
Yeah.
That's another odd coincidence in all this, huh?
Nicky Scarfo, yeah. Now he was old, but the timing is a bit suspicious. I mean, here's a guy who literally knows where the bodies are buried. I think the Philadelphia news media determined he had ordered whacked, at least 24 rival mafia individuals. And Trump has even boasted that, he dealt with the mafia because they pour the concrete, not only in Atlantic City, but also in some of his buildings in New York.
Yeah, I just had AJ Benz on the show last week. We were just talking. He was friends with Trump back in those days, and we were talking. Trump had organized crime bodyguards back in those days. His bodyguards back in those days were New York City wise guys that were walking around with him. We were mentioning their names. So
I think he still does. I think he keeps them around because he doesn't trust the Secret Service.
Well, it's interesting, too. A lot of people don't know this, but there's a connection between Keith Schiller and Blackwater as well, because when Keith Schiller was an NYPD cop, he used to recruit for Blackwater. What he used to do while he was a cop, I don't even know if this is legal back in New York, but he used to recruit all these NYPD cops to work for the Fisher Foundation, for Fisher House. Because this guy, the Fisher guy, he liked to throw these big, what do they call those, funerals, where he would invite like 100 cops to these funerals with bagpipes and to block off traffic and stuff like that. And Keith was the guy who would hire all these cops. And then later on, he went to work for Trump. But he has a Eric Prince connection too as well. A lot of people don't realize that.
Big problem. I wrote a couple stories about how a lot of police departments were being raided by these private mercenary companies like Blackwater, and there was a few others. DynCorp was another one. And, you're talking about some police departments, they may only have, 5 to 10 officers. And I think in the case of, there was one town on the Jersey coast at the shore that was raided, and they lost. They hired some guy out of there, and I think they lost, by hiring him, they lost 1/3 of their police force. But it was a big problem because these companies would offer them much more money than they were making, with the police departments.
Oh, yeah. Oh, not only that, too, but the kind of guys they wanted when Blackwater was trying to raid the NYPD, they wanted guys who had DUIs, had domestic violence charges, guys who were getting kicked off the cops. They wanted guys, that were like, trouble cops. They wanted difficult guys.
And and in the case of the guys that went over places like Bosnia and Kosovo, with DynCorp anyway, there was a huge problem with some of these guys also being involved in child trafficking rings. But when you're put in a country like Kosovo, which is basically run by the Albanian mafia, who's going to stand up and say you can't do that? But DynCorp was one company, not the only one, that had been accused of engaging in trafficking of children for sex.
Back to this lawsuit, though, for a minute. What do you say to people? Because it's out there. Whenever it comes up, people will say, well, that case was thrown out of court, or that was all proven to be, it was all false. And the Clintons have more connections to Epstein than the Trump. Good. I
don't know. I've coined a phrase for a new disease. I call it whataboutism.
Right.
We're not talking. First of all, we're not talking about Bill Clinton. Monica Lewinsky was of age when that affair took place. She was not underage. One can argue the ethics. And look, I was on that story in D.C., and I was a big critic of Clinton. I said, this is not how anyone in this town should operate, whether it's with a clerk. If you're with a law office, you get clerks out of college doing their your interns or pages, and we know about the abuse of the congressional page system. It got so bad the House did away with their page program altogether.
Yeah, thank God for that.
I said, here's the president doing that. So I'm giving Bill Clinton a pass on that, and he was impeached. Maybe not so much for that. He basically brought on himself. But here we have something much, much worse. And clearly it's not something you just say, oh, well, that's Trump being Trump. No, that's Trump being an absolute criminal. And, a lot of people in prison because of that type of behavior. And of course, in Epstein's case, he got a hard deal. because it was a corrupt U.S. attorney rewarded by Trump by being named Secretary of Labor, which, by the way, has oversight on doing away with all the current child labor laws in the United States, which he's doing, by the way. So this is much different. And the throwing it out of court, nothing was thrown out of court. As I mentioned, Judge Abrams ordered all the parties to appear before her on December the 16th, 2016. It was Katie Johnson that pulled the lawsuit because of physical threats made against her and members of her family. So we're not dealing with an aggrieved party who's like a Trump who says I'm being falsely accused. We're dealing with a mobster. Trump in doing this type of thing is no different than a mafia don, no pun intended, who would resort to these tactics to intimidate his enemies.
I'll tell you something else. That week, just by because I've been paying careful attention to this Katie Doe lawsuit, but that week, and especially that day too, when all this was going on, and Lisa Bloom announced that there's going to be doing a press conference, and then her website was shut down with a DDoS attack, and then live stream was shut down with a DDoS attack. When that week, you're not going to believe this. I'm sitting in my car. It's around 5:00. I'm driving home, and I'm flipping through. I stop on Sean Hannity only for a couple of minutes, and he was talking to someone like Corey Lewandowski or something like that, and he goes, "Yeah, we dodged a bullet this week." And the guy goes, "What do you mean?" Epstein. So he knew, he knew, man, and he knew they dodged a bullet with that, and they had to know the circumstances behind it because everybody who was paying attention knew. Yeah.
Well, what I've become aware of is that how did the Trump camp know so much about what Katie Johnson was prepared to say with her attorney Lisa Bloom? And this is sort of the same situation that happened with Maria. Of course, it's not as well known because not a lot of people know as much about the Maria part of this, but there's a feeling there was a leak within Lisa Bloom's law office, and somebody had leaked some information to the Trump side. Same thing with Maria. Maria had already apparently been in contact, or a major news network had been in contact with Maria, and there was a leak out of that network as well to the Trump organization. And one of the reasons Maria went entirely off the radar screen was because one of the producers at this network received a cease and desist letter from Trump's legal people. But we see this over and over again. Now we know how many. I mean, what was it? There may be 100 individuals where there was some negotiations about non-disclosure agreements between Trump and various women.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
I mean, this is a pattern of behavior that suggests that Donald Trump is not only a sexual predator, but his predation also includes, underage girls. We know the Miss Universe, Miss Teen USA pageants, and all the other stuff. And
also his friendship with John Casablancas from Elite Modeling Agency, who then he turned his daughter over to that agency, had a reputation for fascination with underage girls as well. A couple of quick questions.
Now we have the new addition to the White House press office. Carolyn Sunshine, who's 22 years old, was a Disney actress on some teen dance-a-thon. I'm not an expert in that because I don't watch that. I mean, I used to watch American Bandstand with Dick Clark when he was out of Philadelphia. I'm dating myself here, but apparently Carolyn Sunshine, who's 22 years old, whose only political experience is doing an internship for the House Majority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, and being a member of her model United Nations team in high school, is now an assistant press officer for the White House press staff. And if you look at her picture, she looks an awful lot like Ivanka Trump. And I have a story today that I broke based on this information. I was a source of mine in Manhattan told me that 5 waiters who worked at the Trump's Grill at the Trump Tower on Fifth Avenue back in 1997, when Ivanka was 15 years old, witnessed Trump with his hand under the table, with his hand up her skirt, groping his own daughter, who was 15 years old at the time. Now, obviously, when you're an employee of one of Trump's businesses, you're not going to say very much, especially now that we know that Trump ran his organization, still runs his organization like a mob operation, threatening people. They didn't say anything at the time, but my source on this was very confident that these 5 individuals, who no longer work there, by the way, telling the absolute truth.
Do you have actual statements from these 5 witnesses?
Just the common denominator that they witnessed his hand up the daughter's skirt, groping her. One of the reasons why they probably don't want any attention is that they were all 5 are of Hispanic descent, and I was told by the person who conveyed this to me that their immigration status may be questionable.
You know, that's interesting, too. That seems to be a pattern, too, as well with him. Down at Mar-a-Lago, he hires these people through these visa processes, and then he can always just threaten to kick them out of the country. You know?
Yeah, because he doesn't pay them much. You know, that's how he operates. Sure, they get no real benefits, and then he could, as you say, he can threaten to kick them out of the country.
I got a couple of questions for you, just some cleanup stuff. Now, Lisa Bloom, you keep saying that she's was Katie Doe's attorney. Did she ever officially come on board and file any documents with her name on them?
No, as far as I know, that the lawsuit that was first filed in U.S. court in California, I don't believe Lisa Bloom was the attorney for that.
No. I can tell you what happened. In California, that was that guy who was the Jerry Springer guy who was the promoter kind of guy. And they did that on their own. Okay. Right. Katie and him did that on their own. Then they hooked up with Tom Mayer, who's a patents attorney in New Jersey. And then he brought in Cheney Mason, who was the lawyer for that Tot Mom case down there in Florida. He's a big lawyer. Because Tom Mayer, he couldn't, even he said this was over his head. He couldn't do this, but he wanted to help her because he saw her on those gossip things. But Lisa Bloom was invited to come in earlier, and she declined. And it wasn't until that, I didn't see her name come up until that day of the press conference. So either she was announcing she was coming on that day or was just doing a press conference, just for a press conference. It must have been, because what I understand is that when Judge Abrams, when the lawsuit was refiled in New York, Judge Abrams specifically requested, in addition to Trump and Epstein to be in her courtroom, Katie Johnson and Lisa Bloom, who must, at that point in time, she must have been representing her. Okay. At that time, she must have come on board. Or maybe Tom. Now, there had been I understand there have been a lot of donations.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it. because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
Made for Katie's case from well-heeled individuals, I guess mostly in California. And so there was a charge, at least of him taking the money and run with it. But apparently most of that was paid back to the original donors. And the only costs that were involved were, some legal costs that were acquired as a result of, handling the case.
Sure. And then real quick, too, any record of political donations from Trump to Giordano? That would be public.
No, I couldn't determine that. Giordano became sort of a pariah even before he was arrested when he decided to take on Lieberman in the U.S. Senate campaign. That was 2000. So George W. Bush was running for president at the time. And he apparently his people said, we don't want to be on the same stage with Giordano during the campaign. So Giordano was not invited to do that. It's interesting, at the time of Maria's kidnapping, though, Giordano was already in politics. He was the state representative for Waterbury in the state legislature at the time. So he was already somebody. Now, whether he was involved in the same ring that remember, he acquired these two girls from a Puerto Rican prostitute that had a drug problem. Whether this was tied up with the same ring that grabbed Maria, I don't know. But if I were the police up there, or at least the Connecticut State Police, I think I'd be pursuing that angle. Again, we've got a statute of limitations issue.
Yeah.
And I know that police resources are tied up. But as I say, we're not talking about some, truck driver here. We're talking about the President of the United States. And I think that the thing that would bother me, even though there may not be, you can't charge him for involvement with a child sex trafficking ring because of the statute of limitation. You can certainly look at him being in a highly blackmail position if other people have this information.
Exactly. And one more thing, too. We can't forget that Virginia Roberts worked at Mar-a-Lago at an underage. She was like 15 years old when she was working there in the little towel room there. What's going on with that?
Yeah, that one, again, when the judge, and I forget his name, the guy down at the federal court in West Palm Beach, unsealed those files from the Virginia Roberts, the Jane Doe case, I immediately went down to West Palm Beach to try to get access to that stuff. I may have actually encountered Epstein's attorney in the clerk's office there, because there was a very disagreeable guy. I was with an assistant of mine who noted it right away that this guy did not like the questions and the documents I was requesting. But I discovered in looking at the records that there was a reference to Jane Doe 103.
Yeah.
Now, we had heard about Jane Does 1 through 4, Virginia Roberts being one of them. But Jane Doe 103, that means we're dealing with a major serial underage female predator here with Jeffrey Epstein. And, of course, we had Trump himself stating, Jeff Epstein was a friend of mine for 15 years. And he said, I used to go over to his place, which was very close. Epstein's place was like you could walk from Mar-a-Lago to Epstein's place. And he said, I noticed that the kids were, the girls were rather young there, but that's Jeff. He likes them young. And he said, what a nice guy. He invites the neighborhood kids over to use his pool. Can you imagine? This guy's president. And if he actually believed that Epstein was doing that out of the kindness of his heart, he's dumber than I even give him credit for.
Yeah, I don't think he can be that dumb. Wayne, we're coming up to our break, but And now a word from our sponsors.
Hi, folks. Ronnie here from Life Change Tea. There's a lot of hubbub about the ramifications of GMOs. First of all, what are GMOs? Genetically modified organisms. Yee! Man-made organisms entering our body, changing and damaging us from the inside out. What's our defense? First of all, not eating them. Second, cleansing from them when we do eat them. Thank God for Life Change Tea at getthetea.com. Life Change Tea cleanses from toxins, heavy metals, and helps flush GMOs out of your body. Our unique blend of herbs help cleanse you from the inside out, helping you feel refreshed and clean of yee. We also carry unique one-of-a-kind supplements. So order online at getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Rid yourself of the yee that contaminates your food and water. Go to getthetea.com. That's getthetea.com. Get the tea, your best defense.
We all have questions. Did he do it or did he not? We all have opinions, but do we really know the truth? New evidence will now be presented and the ultimate answers will be revealed in the explosive documentary, Serpents Rising. Inspired by the bestseller Double Cross for Blood, an independent investigation of the trial of the century, the lies, the myths, and the concealed evidence. Don't miss Serpents Rising.
This excellent documentary film is available at Serpents Rising at Vimeo Videos on demand. Watch it for $1.99. I want to give a shout out to Shane McKay. You know, there's a lot of obstacles to producing the show and to recording the shows and doing these interviews, especially when you're dealing with the phone service and overseas phone calls and Skype, the audio levels of the guest and the host. So what we do now is when I record these shows, before we air the shows, except for the live segment I do Friday nights, we send the audio file over to Ireland, to Shane McKay. It's spelled S-E-I-N. And it's a gentleman, he came up from Ireland and he volunteered to take my audio and enhance it and edit it down. And now even too, he's editing the commercials for me in and out. And he's our resident audio engineer. And he's doing all this just supporting the show here. Provides high quality audio and music production services remotely from his professional sound studio over there in Ireland. So if I can send him my tapes from here in the U.S., I send him the email, him the MP3. You could do this from anywhere in the world, wherever you are, England, Ireland, the United States, wherever you are, and Shane can handle it for you. He does audio editing and mastering, production management and technical support, audio enhancement and restoration, sound technician, and you can find him on Upwork.com under SEIN and then the letter M. M as in McKay. But his email address, SEINMACKAY@gmail.com. Shane, I can't thank you enough for helping out here and all you do for us. He's an Irish lad up there in Ireland. We don't hold that against him, though. A lot of good folks up there now. Let's see what we're doing here on time. You can have your ad played here at OppermanReport.com every Friday night, 5 p.m., and Saturday night, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And on Friday nights, too, we do a live portion for 1 hour that I just do a live monologue. The ads are very, very inexpensive, and they're also played in the Opperman Report member section. In the member section, you can find all kinds of exclusive content that you won't find anywhere else. It's as cheap as $6 a month, $20 a quarter, or $75 for a year. If you contact me directly at oppermanreport@gmail.com, I'll set you up with a little special deal there where you get a discount if you PayPal me directly, and you even get a copy of my book. I want to thank William Ramsey, who helps us produce the show and book guests. You can find William Ramsey, who's an excellent author, at William Ramsey Investigates on YouTube. Remember, all these shows on Awake are brought to you by emailrevealer.com. You can go to emailrevealer.com and get a copy of my book, How to Become a Successful Private Investigator. You also do all the kind of different services for you. Online dating service investigations called an online infidelity investigation. And that's where you give us your husband or your boyfriend, your girlfriend's email address, and we trace it back to their online dating websites, and we return a list of all the dating sites that email is registered to. We can expand on that investigation and trace it back to porn sites, escort service sites, swinger sites, gambling websites, and even prescription drug websites, and all kinds of digital forensics, computer and cell phone digital forensics, where we can recover deleted content from an email or a hard drive and produce a report for you that you can use in court. That's emailrevealer.com, or you can contact me at oppermaninvestigations@gmail.com.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Okay, welcome back to the Opperman Report. I'm your host, private investigator Ed Opperman. Show's brought to you by GetTheTea.com. Check out Life Change Tea. If you go to GetTheTea.com, it's not just teas. They got all kinds of vitamins and supplements, all kind of stuff, whatever ails you, as they say. But what I've been trying is the pomegranate tea and the Life Change Tea, or the Life Change Tea with pomegranate added to it. And I'm really, really enjoying the effects. I've been talking about it nonstop since we started. We're here today with Wayne Madsen from the WayneMadsenReport.com. Talking about his article, Waterbury, the city that welcome to Waterbury, the city that holds secrets that could bring down Trump.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
I don't know, Wayne. You think anything's going to bring down Trump? It doesn't really matter what comes out about this guy.
Yeah, I know.
You know, what's left?
Yeah, and there's not much left. Even he said I could go out and shoot somebody on, what was it, Fifth Avenue, and I'd still be popular. Well, maybe so, but it's having done a lot of stories and actually having been involved in the Navy with the FBI and NCIS, then called NIS, on a major pedophile investigation. It just irritates me that these people believe that they're, can get away with that kind of stuff. But again, given the money that they have, I guess there's good reason they think they can.
Yeah, and if you look at Trump's whole history, way back with Roy Cohn, there's all those allegations about Roy Cohn with little boys and stuff. It's just, I don't think he's afraid of anything. I think he's been around places, got those hotel rooms where he could blackmail everybody, could tape record what's going on. He got the Mar-a-Lago switchboard in his bedroom. He's listening in on all the calls. God knows what this guy has.
Look, guys, even the guys that have written books about him, including the most recent one by Michael Wolff. I mean, this guy, Trump he's absolutely a repulsive individual. To think of him as president, even people in business won't want to do business with this guy.
But we were talking about the Clintons before. You don't give the Bill Clinton at least, a pass on his relationship with Epstein, do you?
No, as a matter of fact, look, remember I mentioned, I think it was totally irresponsible when he, what he was doing with Lewinsky back in the White House. Look, it's one thing to go off to New York. We know that JFK even did that. He had a lot of love interests, but he usually take these. These would be this stuff would happen in Manhattan, but. I mean, I try to tell people, I said, look, you're not going to keep anything secret in the White House. It's like trying to have an affair with a woman on the main concourse of Grand Central Station. And you think you're keeping it secret? I mean, the White House is, for all time, even the private quarters aren't that private. And for Clinton to accept any sort of gratuity from somebody like Epstein was just, what's he thinking? But I don't think he's the most responsible person. I've researched a lot of presidents and their after presidents and what they did, and a lot of them were exemplary, going back to Herbert Hoover and Harry Truman and Eisenhower and Nixon and especially Jimmy Carter. There was never a hint of any of that impropriety in their in their time as an ex-president.
Yeah. You were mentioning before that you just wrote an article today about how Trump is having trouble hiring lawyers.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in Washington for some time. I've met a lot of lawyers, including some president, and the stock and trade, and there's only a handful of these guys, mostly guys. There's a few women too. But if you're like the lawyer for president, either as general counsel, where you're actually part of the White House staff, or you're the personal lawyer for the president, that's something you can market.
Sure.
You can name your own rates. You can name your own clients. And in the case of Trump, they're just running away from him. And now the last guy that left, John Dowd, apparently is no lightweight, but was fired by Trump. I think it was it was based on mutual agreement that he would leave. The latest is that Ty Cobb, who works with Don McGahn in the general counsel's office, may be history. Include also McGahn. Now they're saying that Trump doesn't. People are saying he doesn't need a chief of staff. He doesn't need a communications director. He doesn't even need an attorney. He can be all of those things. Well, now the guy that replaced Dowd is the assistant district attorney in Brunswick, Georgia. Why? Because the city attorney of Nome, Alaska was not available. I mean, but this guy, Economou is his name. He also has a PhD in medieval history. So maybe that's the strategy. He's going to argue that Trump is very similar to Emperor Caligula in Rome, and we should feel sorry for him because any incest or any other sexual proclivities on the part of Trump is no different than, Caligula. There's not an attorney. Look how many attorneys have turned him down. We were told that Emmett Flood, who was Clinton's impeachment attorney.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
Was going to join the staff. No more information on that. Not only these attorneys know Trump's record for stiffing his attorneys, he doesn't pay his legal bills, but they know he's an absolutely repulsive individual. And as I put it, he's the client from hell because he won't keep his mouth shut and he won't stop twittering information that's going to be used by not only the special counsel Mueller, but could be used in many of these other civil cases being brought against him, including the one being pursued by Michael Avenatti, the lawyer for Stormy Daniels.
I tell you, I love your stand-up, by the way. Some great one-liners in there. But you're not a young man. Have you ever seen anything like this before in your life? In history?
No, I mean, we're talking about Clinton. I remember being down at the federal courthouse in Washington when Hillary Clinton came in, and then First Lady, to testify in that trial. This was the infamous or famous definite. It depends on what your definition of is. I said, well, there's a first. Here we have a president who's trying to parse a one-syllable word. And I thought that was it. I thought, oh, we've seen it all. And then, of course, we had the election of 2000 when I was back down at the Supreme Court, and there was a circus atmosphere of waiting for their decision to be made. I never thought it would get to this point, though. I was a college student during the whole Watergate episode, and I thought that was something else. But this is, Watergate is like a case of jaywalking compared to this.
During the election, the general election, I predicted that Trump would wind up in jail. He's going to wind up in prison because he just cannot withstand the scrutiny. that he's under right now. I never dreamed it would be this chaotic. But what do you predict is going to come out of this?
Well, there's some question as to whether even a sitting president can be indicted. The jury's out on that. But I mentioned that there is some crime with statute of limitations doesn't apply to certain crimes. We still don't know the full story about the helicopter crash in 1989. It killed 3 of his top executives that were flying from the Manhattan down to Atlantic City after attending a press conference announcing some boxing match that Trump was hosting in Atlantic City. Was between Hector Camacho and Pazienza, I think, was the other guy, and that was scheduled for 1990. But these 3 top execs of the Trump organization of his casinos were due to talk to FBI agents about the mob influence in fixing boxing matches. Oddly enough, and the helicopter crashes, I think, about 40 miles north of Atlantic City off the Garden State Parkway. All 3 execs are killed. The 2 crew are killed. The pilot had just been in contact with the control tower at McGuire Air Force Base saying, hey, everything's fine, and all of a sudden witnesses said there was a loud explosion and they found the rotor about a mile away from the main crash site. Look, you don't have to be Lieutenant Colombo to figure out that there may have been a bomb on that helicopter. And by eliminating those 3 guys, you also eliminated 3 potential witnesses to the feds that could have short-circuited Trump's career back in 1989 or 90. But why isn't there an interest in reopening that? I'm sure that they had kids. One of the executives was from the Grossinger family, that owned the big hotel up in the Catskills where all the famous Jewish comedians used to entertain up there. They used to call it the Borscht Belt. So obviously, there's got to be relatives that would want to pursue that. And if you can nail Trump on a criminal matter where there's no statute of limitation, like murder, I think that then we could be talking about a president going to prison.
I was always suspicious of that helicopter crash, especially later on when Trump tried to blame those executives for the reason why his bankruptcy was. But also, too,
what's even more suspicious is that Trump was apparently at the helipad and told he was supposed to fly with them. But what he did is he made sure they were on the helicopter. He said, "Hey guys, something came up. I can't join you. Have a good flight."
But now that we know the other story about his helicopter pilot who ran his shuttles with the big drug conviction or the drug arrest, and then somehow his case winds up in front of Trump's sister in federal court, and then she tells the court, "Oh, I love this guy. He's my best friend. He's a wonderful guy. I can't take this case, but you should all know that I love him. And he's a wonderful guy." You know what I mean? And then Trump gives him an apartment at Trump Tower. I've always been suspicious of that. Suspicious.
Like I told people, the only difference between the Sopranos and the Trumps is that the Sopranos probably serve better food at their dinner table than Trump ever has.
Yeah, Sopranos.
There's a guy that's thinks that McDonald's Big Macs are haute cuisine. Yeah,
they had Soprano steaks. Now I got a question for you, though. Speaking of. Why do you think it is? Why isn't Mueller looking into all this stuff about Katie Doe and Marie and all this kind of stuff?
From what I understand, and this is through the grapevine, Mueller is aware of it, but, for a special prosecutor like special counsel like Mueller, you got to keep it focused on the issue that he was originally brought in for, which is the Russia thing. Now, I believe that the Russia thing is not collusion. And when Trump says there was no collusion on the election, and then he gets real nervous when there's word, well, maybe how about collusion between Russian mob figures and Russian oligarchs in your business operations? He gets real nervous then. And I think that is where they're going to nail it. Trump is absolutely, and I've mapped this out, this what I call the Trump syndicate. And it involves every ne'er-do-well you could possibly imagine. And this organization is involved not only in trafficking, sex trafficking, but drugs and money laundering and murder for hire and smuggling and embezzlement. I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yeah, even A.J. Benza the other day, and by the way, he used to talk to Trump every morning when he came home from partying all night long. He would lie down on the floor. He had to take some pain pills, and he would lie down on the floor, and the first thing he did in the morning was talk to Trump on the phone every day. So they were very close friends. And he's
what a way to start out your day.
Well, I think he was finishing his day. He's going over partying all night. But the thing is even he, and he's a big Trump fan now, he's making every excuse in the world for him. But even he could not deny the money laundering part. Like, he just said, well, that's business. That's just how things go.
It's monkey business. Because when you got 500, at least 500 limited liability corporations, right, many of them in offshore locations, that spells out in big red letters money laundering. And that's just one of, like I said, many things involved. He just lost his brand on and control over his hotel complex in Panama City in Panama to the actual owners of those condos, because they didn't want the Trump name associated with it anymore. And it's well known in Panama that many Colombian narco syndicate leaders were laundering their money by buying those condos there. And that's not the only place they were doing it.
What do you make of the Steele dossier? You think the Russians have blackmailed dirt on Trump?
Originally, I did not. I look, I've dealt, as I mentioned when we started out, I get a lot of stuff sent to me over the transom, and, I look at it and, first of all, what's the reason? Why is this being released at this particular time? It was no great, surprise to me that the British government would not want Trump in there as president. And so I took some of what was in that document with a grain of salt. But the more I look into it, especially in light of this investigation in Connecticut and the Epstein stuff with Trump, I think it is very possible. I mentioned that Bill Clinton is totally irresponsible, but I think Trump is even more irresponsible. I don't think he thought one iota for 1 second about the problems he would encounter by being invited to any party while he was in Moscow. And now I'm beginning to think that the Russians probably do have something on him. I was in the Soviet Union. I remember, there used to be a lady at the end of the hallway who was a babushka.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
If you want to get decent toilet paper, you give her a pack of Marlboros, which I did. But that woman was there to allow the intelligence people into the various hotel rooms of Westerners so they could search through their belongings. And imagine, with Trump's peccadillos, what they had organized for him.
That's interesting, too, because, nothing A.J. Benza said was he had a conversation with Trump and he was saying how he liked Cuban women. And Trump told him, no way, get yourself a Russian broad. They got no morals. And this was in the middle of the 90s when that statement was made. So the guy, yeah. Let me ask you a question now. We've had a series of presidents, Bush, then Clinton, then Bush Jr., and they all have that, even Obama, they all have that CIA thread running through them. But Trump obviously does not, or does he?
No, I haven't determined any. As a matter of fact, look, I think, people talk about he's opposed to the deep state, but I look at him closely and I say, well, maybe not the deep state that we're familiar with, the one, as you say, CIA connection, but there's a deep state there, but it's the sort of the mafia state, which is also a deep state. Now, we know that the CIA has dealt with the mafia many, many times, but to have somebody who's a product of that particular deep state. Now, I think in terms, like, for example, take a country like Kosovo, I mentioned earlier. Kosovo is a mafia state. The mafia runs it. It was created by an organized criminal syndicate that was also a terrorist organization, the Kosovo Liberation Army. So I'm thinking more of Trump's deep state in terms of that. Look who he's putting in his administration, people who are, have all these issues. He's putting people in charge of regulatory agencies who are coming from companies that are the folks as regulators, putting the fox in charge of the hen house. He said he was going to drain the swamp, but he's replaced one set of swamp creatures with even a more disgusting type. So anyway, that's my take. Yeah. He's not tied to the CIA. Look, if the CIA thought he was useful with any of these foreign enterprises he had, the 500 LLCs, they would. We would have seen something on how they would have used them. In many cases, Trump was working against U.S. interests and U.S. intelligence interests by dealing with some of these oligarchs who, the CIA, neither the CIA nor the FBI really care for that much.
Back to Epstein for a second here. We got Dershowitz, right?
Cool. Yeah.
Up to his neck with Epstein's, allegedly, according to Virginia Roberts. They're in the room while she's performing oral sex on Epstein. Dershowitz is standing there in the room, chatting away with him.
Waiting in line, no doubt.
Right. And his defense is, I brought my wife and daughter with me when I visited Epstein.
Yeah, but he also said that at one point in time he was getting a massage and he only stripped down to his underwear. Now, that's a terrible visual if you're thinking about somebody like Dershowitz. But isn't it funny? Even Jeffrey Toobin, who's the CNN lawyer, a legal expert, who actually Dershowitz was his law professor at Harvard. Even Toobin has said, Alan, I don't know what's gotten into you with you and defending Trump all the time. It's almost like Toobin has figured it out, but dare not say anything over the air.
Mm-hmm. It seems it's obvious the reason.
Yes, obvious.
And that's the only connection, right? That's the only connection. What
it's the only connection. Look, Dershowitz is known, whether you like him or hate him, and I don't like him. He's always been one to champion privacy rights, civil liberties. That seems to be his his chapeau over his legal career. But how could he support a guy who tramples on civil liberties, who tramples on privacy rights, who's sending ICE agents onto Facebook to determine who's in the country legally and who isn't? And then all this. So Dershowitz has this blind spot for Donald Trump.
Now, imagine
another reason.
Yeah, imagine when ICE went into those 7-Elevens and started arresting all those people too. How pathetic is that, man? These people are the guy that I'm buying my coffee from in the morning is a danger to the country. Give me a break.
Right.
That's horrific. But Dershowitz now he goes on Fox News every night talking, or even CNN. He goes on defending Trump every night. You'd think he would be on the top list rather than the Nome, Alaska guy he just hired, right? Why doesn't Dershowitz demand to come in there and Trump, I want to lead your legal team? Why?
Too much sunlight on that relationship is probably what I figure. So you got the only thing in common, of course, is the Dershowitz connection to Epstein and Trump and Mar-a-Lago and down on the island and in the Virgin Islands.
And you think that's what's preventing him from actually, because no one's talking about it, no one bothers him. He even said, this is the last time I'm going to talk about Epstein. And they said, okay.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous. And Epstein, I mean, look at this sweetheart deal. And why did no one question Alex Acosta in his confirmation hearing? There was a few questions about it, but it should have been a focus. But the Republicans managed to cover that all up. There was a question about it from one Democratic senator. I forget which one it was, but that should have been. I know the Republicans run the committee and they run the Senate, but you would have thought there would have been a lot more questions posed to Alex Acosta about that sweetheart deal he did that basically let everyone else off.
Right.
The federal government agreed never to prosecute anybody. It was called an MPA, not an NDA. This was a non-prosecution agreement. Anyone associated with that ring down in Mar-a-Lago or Palm Beach, and that would be Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, Dershowitz, and Prince Andrew of the UK, and many others.
Outrageous. Why don't you think it was brought up during the primary, Epstein?
It's funny because when I wrote a book about Obama's and his family's links to the CIA,
right? And
I only discovered that when I was at the National Archives, and it was like a month after, not even a month, maybe 2 weeks after Obama's inauguration, and I said, "Holy cow! How come we didn't hear about this during the election campaign?" There used to be reporters who would actually delve into this stuff. I mean, there were reporters I think could tell you how many lemon trees were on the lemon grove where Richard Nixon grew up in Yorba Linda, California, and now no one asks these questions. They're all these softball questions. It's all, and look, I think the media bent over backwards to help Trump too.
Well, the Obama CIA connection is pretty obvious. Especially you wrote the book about it.
After I went to Indonesia and I was, hanging around the two schools, I wasn't interested in him as a 7-year-older, and I was interested in what teachers remembered from his parents. Stanley Ann Dunham and his Indonesian stepfather, and I was then informed that somebody from the U.S. Embassy was tailing me in Jakarta. So that's when it became very apparent. Not only did he have a connection to the agency, he still maintained one, obviously, with the agency because they were looking out for him.
Right. But now, how could people like Sean Hannity must be aware of this, and people who Sheriff Arpaio. Why are they all babbling on about he's a Muslim Brotherhood and he's all this stuff?
Oh, well, look, I mean, you're assuming a guy like Hannity, who got his start in radio in the big market of Huntsville, Alabama, understands anything. And Arpaio, I mean, he was too busy dressing up inmates in pink prison outfits.
So in your book, The Almost Classified Guide to CIA Front Companies, do you get into Business International?
Yes. That was, it's one of the larger entries. I mean, that's one of many. The idea behind writing the book actually came from a former CIA employee. Who oddly enough also worked in the media. He worked for Chet Huntley and David Brinkley at NBC News, and later during the Watergate investigation for Walter Cronkite at CBS. And he told me, he said, that would be a fascinating book. And I said to him, I said, listen, I don't think there's enough material. We know about the obvious front companies, Southern Air Transport, Air America, Business International. But I said, I'd be lucky, I think, to get 100 pages. And after I started, when I was up to 420 pages, I realized, my God, it's not just the obvious ones. It's the ones that weren't so obvious. A lot of law firms, a lot of media operations, A lot of nonprofits were all linked to the CIA. As I pointed out, to some people, I said, what do you think about an agency that had operations going on with the 4-H club at the same time they were making deals with the Hells Angels?
Wow. Hey, what did you come across TRW?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I tell you, it blew my mind. I had on Boyce, from Falcon and the Snowman. I had him on the show. His wife was just on the show recently too. And it blew my mind. I had no idea. I didn't know anything about that. What can you tell us about that?
Well, from what I recall, and listen, look, I used to be involved in security in the Navy, and that was one of my case examples as far as doing due diligence when it comes to determining whether you got somebody in your organization who's spying. But that had a lot to do with the overthrow of the democratic government in Australia in 1975,
right?
Because TRW was intimately involved in some of those surveillance bases in Australia and had a keen interest in getting rid of the Labour Prime Minister at the time, whose name was Gough Whitlam. Much later, I was actually contacted by Mr. Whitlam's secretary, something I had written that he had seen, and he was very, very appreciative of what I wrote. It had something to do with his overthrow. Something I guess I had gotten out of the CIA records at the archives, but he died a few years back. He lived to a very, very old age. But yeah, so that was, now I can see, of course it was the Soviets who were on the receiving end of that information, but one of the intents, of course, was to expose what the U.S. had done quite illegally in Australia.
Let me ask you this, because in the book, The Almost Classified Guide to CIA Front Companies, isn't it unlawful or illegal? It's a crime to out CIA agents. I know that for a fact. But what about the CIA front companies? Are allowed to do that?
No, that's why I say almost classified. The Intelligence Identities Act, I believe, of 1981 doesn't cover, in this case, Citizens United does not apply. Corporations are not people. I hate to tell Mitt Romney that, but in this case, corporations are not people.
There's a really interesting case going on right now with Wade Robeson and his lawsuit against the Michael Jackson corporations around him. And the judge ruled in that case that because Michael Jackson created a corporate shield to recruit these little kids and their families and stuff like that, that's being used as a criminal defense. The corporate shield is being used as a criminal defense in this case. Is that fascinating or what?
Well, I don't know about that case, but I do know that one of the reasons people incorporate is to hide behind the corporate veil. And having a corporation does provide that. Even an LLC like Trump's got about 500 of them.
Yeah.
Limited liability corporations is to, protect your assets from lawsuits. That's why it's called limited liability.
Now, again, in the Almost Classified Guide to CIA Front Companies, which company would surprise us the most, do you think?
Oh, I think as a journalist, some of the media companies I had heard, over the years, I had anecdotal reasons to believe some of them were tied.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
In with the CIA, but when I actually looked at some of the documents on Operation Mockingbird, for example, which was an effort by the CIA to influence the media, it's very surprising that some of these networks close to the CIA, and there was an interchange where they used some of their journalists overseas as agents. I mean, the guy that brought this to my attention had worked for the CIA in Southeast Asia and transferred over to NBC News. So he was kind of an example of what I was writing about or discovering. So I guess that was, and not so much the big networks, but some of the newspapers, not the big ones like the New York Times and Washington Post. I think it's pretty well established, their connections with the agency. But, the Cleveland Plain Dealer, these are papers you would not associate with that kind of stuff. But the Miami Herald is another one. And that's only because of the Cuban operations that were based out of southern Florida. A few other, even medium city newspapers really shocked me.
It's funny, as you were talking about, mentioned the media and the CIA. Recently, I had a story about Steve Bannon's porn and meth house. And,
yeah.
And I interviewed the guy who was the tenant after Steve Bannon left. As that story was fed to me, I had suspicions about some of the people who were feeding me this information.
Right.
But it kind of reminds me now about Steve Bannon and his comments about the Epstein Trump lawsuit. What do you know about that?
Look, you may know more about that than I do, but I looked at that situation. It reminded me a lot of the Marco Rubio's friend who later wound up, they were arrested together in a park right off Brickell Avenue in Miami. Back, I think Rubio had done 1 year in college at Missouri and came back to Florida. And he was with a high school buddy, and they were both arrested in a park that was a well-known pickup place, by the way, for homosexuals looking for younger guys. But the same guy he was arrested with later turns out he's renting a house to some guy that was doing gay porno movies, live streaming these porno movies. And in this like residential neighborhood, people were complaining about it, and they specialize in like gay porn for blacks and Hispanic guys. And they would actually stay in this house. So when I read about the meth and the porn palace where Bannon lived, he claimed that he blamed it all on the ex-wife. Isn't that what they always do?
Yeah, and there's no doubt the ex-wife was up to her neck and all that. She got busted bringing her phone and marijuana to her boyfriend in jail.
Yeah, but first of all, what's a guy like Bannon, who's an ex-naval officer? He was in the Navy the same time I was. What's he doing hooking up with somebody like that,
All right.
This is a guy that went to work for Goldman Sachs, master and MBA, and he winds up with, somebody like that as a wife. You kind of wonder what's the rest of that story. But I've told my colleague, Andy Craig, I said, Andy, there's a lot of these stories in Southern Florida. So now this story about Maria took us up to Waterbury, but I think there's a lot of potential stories similar to that just in Miami-Dade and maybe Broward and Palm Beach County.
I'll send you the link to the interview. One of the things that the new tenant told me was that, first of all, they found evidence of padlocks on the inside doors, as if someone was being kept inside. And then he said at the very end of the interview, he says, I just hope this comes out to expose human trafficking and other cases in Palm Beach.
Well, it may be for more than Palm Beach. I just did an investigation. It's not completed yet about this congressman from the 1st District of Florida, which is the Panhandle, Matt Gaetz, whose father is a state senator here in Florida. Matt Gaetz was the only member of either the U.S. House or the Senate to vote against a human trafficking bill. The question is why. Now, he's being challenged by a Republican named Chris Dosev for the Republican nomination, who's asked the same question. Why did he do that? He's also the guy that's who stood on the floor of the House several times calling for the firing of Robert Mueller. He got at least two rides on Air Force One. Both were trips from Washington down to West Palm Beach, Fort Lauderdale. on it. And so what's this connection? Why did he vote against? So I think not only in southern Florida, I think we've also got an issue with Gates's district, which is the Panhandle, which is amusingly referred to as the Redneck Riviera, which goes from Fort Walton Beach over to Pensacola. I have been told that Gates has a very sordid history himself, which is very powerful father who made his money in hospice centers, privatized hospice centers in Florida, just like our Governor Rick Scott made his fortune from ripping off Medicaid nursing homes. That Matt Gates has an issue in college where his college roommate was found dead with a plastic bag over his head with semen stains all over the place. Sounds like autoerotic asphyxiation, and maybe something went wrong, horribly wrong, but the incident was covered up by his very powerful political father. And now he's hooked up with Trump.
And Nader, too, just recently, too, the one that was at that Seychelles meeting. He had an arrest for child pornography as well.
Yeah, arrested for child pornography, I believe, by U.S. authorities in 1985, but also was arrested by Czech authorities in Prague for involvement with a pedophile ring. I mean, it's quite possible the reason he's cooperating with Mueller is, they've got even more stuff on him. And, but he seemed to have gotten off the hook on both those past cases. In some cases, that's your perfect guy because he got off twice, but he may be facing a prosecution. Although I think they ought to go ahead and prosecute him and not try to deal with him as a cooperating witness. But I'm not running the investigation.
Now, can you think of a person in recent history who has more friendships and more connections to and more Mike Tyson, Steve Bannon, what was ever going down there?
And whatever that was about.
Yeah, Michael Jackson.
Congressman Gates. One term. He's his first term of congressman. He's getting rides on Air Force One. He's also it's been thrown out there that he could be a replacement for Jeff Sessions as Attorney General.
But it's fine times, Yeah,
I agree.
Yeah. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask you that you think you could add to this Epstein Maria thing?
Well, it's still, for me, it's an active investigation. I'm not done with it. I'm not done with Gates and why he was the only member of the U.S. Congress to vote against the trafficking bill. And all of a sudden he becomes Donald Trump's best friend in Congress. Look, I like I say, I don't think you got to be Lieutenant Columbo to figure out a lot of these connections. But it's a long way before like the end of the Columbo show where he pokes his head back in the door and says, "Excuse me, ma'am, you're under arrest," or "Sir," what as the case may be. There's a lot more to look into.
Let me ask you real quick again. Why do you think we just had the recent Kevin Spacey revelations, and that came out and it was 24 hours. That was a big, big one, right? But nothing was mentioned about him being on a plane with Epstein and Clinton and Chris Tucker. Why?
I think it may have to do with some of the people, not in the news media, but the entertainment industry that runs the news media.
Right.
Then we start thinking about guys like Harvey Weinstein. And is there a willful decision made at those levels? Hey, look, we don't want to go there. Because once you open up that Pandora's box, you don't know what's going to come out of it. I think it's interesting that there's now been a link between Cambridge Analytica, this data mining firm, and this Israeli ex-Mossad company called Black Cube. This is the same company that was hired by Weinstein to pick up dirt on the women who were accusing him of sexual assault. So, I mean, with guys like that involved, what else is at play here? You got guys like Michael Cohen making threats or hiring people to make threats. This is all this is all legitimate to look into. But, it could be for the people who are involved more closely in these situations, it could be very dangerous. I'm thinking of Stormy Daniels and Maria and Katie and the Miss Teen USA contestants that said Trump did various things to them. And even women that worked for the Trump organization. Several of them have come forward. So, if you got ex-Mossad guys and mafiosi thugs running around trying to harass people or making threats, then that may be a reason why the media, for example, doesn't look into these matters.
Yeah, you have Mossad running interference for Epstein as well. Conchita Sarnoff's book was published by a Mossad agent.
Yeah, and then you got the connection between him and Les Wexner, who was well known as an organized crime figure in Ohio,
really,
in Columbus, where he got his start. I talked to people in Columbus who, told me that, this guy Wexner, why does he select a guy out of the Dalton School who's teaching 7th grade kids? Why does Wexner select this guy Epstein out and makes him as sort of like business heir apparent? I mean, unless they had something in common, like being predators on underage kids.
Well, actually, Epstein went to work for a brokerage house, and he got into that brokerage company because he befriended the guy's teenage daughter at school.
Yeah.
He was He was tutoring her in math, and then he became a big shot over this broker. I forget which one, Goldman Sachs, whatever, which one. And then he later on, when he left there, he says, "Oh, I'm only taking billionaire clients," and then he goes and picks up Wexner, and who knows what they're doing together.
Yeah.
Now, fast.
Oh, well, here's the other thing. What's one of the stores that Wexner owns?
The Limited Too.
His secrets.
Yeah.
And use teen models. And how was this whole thing arranged originally to get Katie Johnson over there? She was approached by Tiffany Doe, who was 22, told look, we can help you break into the modeling business. It's very apparent to me when you're 13 and you're in Manhattan, you're obviously a runaway. And so what was going on? Was this the dangle used to get these girls in those cases? Obviously, in the case of Maria, she was abducted.
Yeah, and with Trump Modeling Agency, when Trump Modeling Agency got sued by that Haitian girl, who was a young girl herself, it came out that I forget what the number was. It was like out of 200 HB1 visas, 180 of them were for Trump Modeling Agency. That he's importing all these girls for Trump Modeling Agency.
Yeah. And that may also get into this reason why Matt Gaetz, as congressman, voted against a trafficking bill, because apparently the Florida panhandle is used to import a lot of underage kids for sex trafficking that come in from south of Latin America, the Caribbean. Panama City, not the one in Panama, but the one in Florida being, from what I was told by, in one case, a private investigator there, that's a nexus for that activity. So here you got Gaetz is all of a sudden Trump's new best friend.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with this Gaetz thing at all. I got to take a good look at that. And it's interesting, this pattern too, of how we have Cambridge Analytica bragging openly about sending prostitutes over there and blackmailing people.
Yeah, especially Ukrainians. Right. We know from guy Alexander Nix, he says, well, they're always very good looking and they're the best to use. Aside from Marla Maples, that's been, Trump's two wives had been from Eastern Europe, Ivana from then Czechoslovakia and Melania from the former Yugoslavia.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.
But the thing is, too, is Jared, his father, did the same thing. When he got in the jackpot there for giving those donations illegally. He went and hired a prostitute to blackmail his own brother-in-law.
His brother-in-law and his accountant. You know, what a heartwarming story, family story that is. Not only that, Charles Kushner, his father, was the guy that arranged for a little-known mayor of Woodbridge, New Jersey, named Jim McGreevy to make a trip to Israel, where he was befriended by a guy that later turned out to be a Mossad honey trap, Golan Sippel, who later became an aide to then Governor McGreevy in Trenton, and of course when McGreevy started to renege on some promises made to Charles Kushner, he got outed as being gay.
Ah, is that what happened?
Blackmail, setting people up. Seems to be a Kushner specialty. And I think it's ironic that the guy that went after the U.S. attorney that basically put Kushner's dad in jail was Chris Christie,
Right.
Which is why Christie's not in the cabinet right now.
Even more funny to me is when Manafort gets in the jackpot here, he's under indictment all over the place. Who steps in to take over his accounts but Giuliani?
Yeah.
All those Ukraine accounts and stuff, you know?
Yeah. Who needs to watch old episodes of The Sopranos or The Godfather? When you got this happening in real time.
Let me ask you something, because I've seen the name Wayne Madsen for 20 years. I read your stuff all the time. How old are you?
Well, I'll be 64 in a couple of weeks.
Okay, you're not that old. Okay, I'm 55. Now, what do you think?
Thank you for saying I'm not that old.
No.
I get other responses to that from other people depending on the audience. But go ahead.
Oh, if you drink the tea, get the tea.com. You drink the tea, you'll feel younger. What do you think, though, man? Will the public ever wake up and oust these tyrants out the rascals, and vote them out, or get our pitchforks and kick them out?
Well, maybe the public's been hoodwinked one too many times. After all, Trump's whole campaign was, let's drain the swamp, let's get rid of the usual suspects. Well, we replaced the usual suspects with even worse suspects. In some cases, no longer suspects, but criminals. How much more can the public stand to be hoodwinked and bamboozled by these characters? And I don't know, Trump has probably lowered the bar on the presidency to the point where now we're going to have celebrity presidents. As far as we can see, Oprah talking about running, this guy, Mark Cuban talking about running.
Yeah.
I think we need to get back to and we may not ever be able to do this. I think we got to get back to like a soft-spoken, competent government manager, a politician. As bad as they may be, they know how the system operates. But I doubt we're ever going to get somebody like as much as I despise the family of George H.W. Bush or a Jimmy Carter or a Richard Nixon, with all his faults, he was a capable president. He was just entirely paranoid, and that's what did him in.
Who did you support in the last election?
Well, as a journalist, I usually don't really support anyone. I did cover the two conventions for InfoWars, but I've since not cut my ties to that operation because that was just totally in bed with Trump. I saw it at the convention in Cleveland, and I think the job of a journalist isn't to take sides. I did not vote. I didn't like either one of the two candidates. I knew that Hillary would bring back all the bad stuff of the 90s. I remembered my frostbitten toes standing in front of the federal courthouse in Washington during that whole Monica Lewinsky episode. So I didn't want to have to go back to that. And Trump just was, there was just too much there. Not good information on him.
Yeah, I hear you. Well,
I didn't vote. I didn't vote in the last one. I thought Obama in 2008 was a change of scenery, but in 2012, when it was between him and Mitt Romney, there's to me that was not a choice.
Right. Well, we're out of time. Wade Madsen, I really enjoyed this. I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, and also to giving me that extra time because I know you were worried about your throat and stuff like that. And I really appreciate that because
fortunately the voice held up. The allergies are bad, but today with a nice wind blowing, it's blown all the pollen away. So that's one good thing.
You got to get the tea. It'll cure what ails you. Now, let me. Where can people find you if they want to follow you besides Wayne Madsen reports.com?
Oh yeah, well I'm at. They can follow me on Twitter at WMRDC as in District of Columbia, and some of my daily reports are picked up by other websites. So if they don't see it at my website, eventually they'll wind up on sites like intrepidreport.com.
Okay, great. I love Intrepid. I've had a lot of their reporters on here. Excellent. If anything comes up with Maria, contact me. We'll put you right on the air, okay?
Anyone who has any information on that, I'm more than willing to, take that in and pursue it.
Thank you, Wayne. Good night.
Bye now.
Okay, well, then we had Wayne Madsen talking to us about in this very underreported lawsuit where these young girls, Katie Johnson, reported that she was raped by Donald Trump when she was 13 years old. She was raped by Jeffrey Epstein when she was 13 years old. And she had two witnesses. She had her friend Joan and her friend Tiffany come forward and corroborate her statements. But at the very last second, what happened was Lisa Bloom was supposed to have a press conference. And there was a DDS attack on Lisa Bloom. There was a DDS attack on live stream. And this panicked everybody so much. Everybody got peed their pants and head for the hills. So anyway, thank you so much, Wade Madsen. The book is something about the CIA. I don't have my notes in front of me at the moment. Sorry about that, Wayne. CIA front companies. Just Google Wade Madsen. You find us at WadeMadsenReports.com. I put out a video on YouTube, not a video, it's an audio, and something along the lines of our urgent plea to raise funds to save the Opperman report. I think we'll be safe. I think the show will be on next week. Okay, so I really appreciate it. But if you get a chance and you can go there and listen to the video and hear what the situation is, what I went through with Cox Cable, just pulling money out of my account with no warning and no authorization whatsoever. Be careful. Don't ever pay Cox Cable with your debit card because they'll just take it and say that you authorized easy payment with them and just snatch all the money. Whether you got overdrafts and stuff like that, they don't even care. Anyway, be very careful with that. But it looks like we'll be on for another month or two. But if people would just be consistent with the donations and, we wouldn't have to have these crises all the time. It would take a lot of stress off me. I wasted a whole day, all this kind of panic and nerves and stuff like that. Great advertising opportunities here at the Opperman Report. You contact me at oppermanreport@gmail.com. And we're on Monday to Saturday, drive time, 6 days a week. On AM radio, you can catch us there. Plus iHeart, iTunes, YouTube, Spreaker, Podbean, Podroll, all those pod nonsenses, everything pod, anything with a pod, 2 P's in a pod. You can hear the show, hear the show on there. Great stuff coming up. And as I mentioned with the guest there, Wayne Madsen, we have a show coming up with Mike Parziale about Hollywood pedophilia. It's a nice 2-hour show. Mike always comes ready to hunt. He's got great stuff all the time. Every time he comes, he's loaded. loaded for bear's expression. Another show I did with Tony Bennett, not Tony Bennett, the singer. And I should have practiced my Tony Bennett impersonation. I'm gonna have it ready for you Friday night, I promise. Okay. I don't know any Tony Bennett songs. But he talks about this case, Stuart Lubbock in the UK, who drowned in a pool, and this Montgomery guy, who's like Johnny Carson over there. And this kid, Stuart Lubbock, died in this pool and brutally anally raped and abused by these party goers over there. And the whole thing was covered up. No one was ever arrested. No one was ever convicted. That's an excellent 2-hour show as well. And I have Gretchen Bonaducci coming up, who's the ex-wife of Danny Bonaducci from the Partridge Family, who went on to fame of reality TV show of Breaking Bonaducci. So we got a lot of good content in store for you. Always updating the member section. If you like this show, go to OppermanReport.com and become a member. We got great stuff in that member section. The Steve Bannon Porn and Meth House we were just talking about today. I interviewed the guy who moved into Steve Bannon's house after Steve Bannon vacated there in Florida. He talks about finding, they did chemical tests. They found residue of methamphetamine. They found evidence of porn filming. People were talking about it. Neighbors, repairmen were talking about them filming porn in there. All kinds of crazy shenanigans going on down there at the Steve Bannon's Wild Porn and Meth House. The Porn Palace. Stupid Wade Madsen calls it. But anyway, you can find Wade Madsen at WadeMadsenReports.com. You can find my stuff at OperaReport.com. Become a member, and that's what supports the show. You want a special deal? I'll give you a great rate. Contact me at OppermanReport@gmail.com. OppermanReport@gmail.com, and I'll give you 13 months for $60. Low. And now a word from our sponsors. The Opperman Report is brought to you by SubhashTechnosis.com.
People are waking up. They're standing up to those pushing pesticides and GMOs as safe alternatives for a starving world. What a bunch of crap! I tell you, I'd rather eat dirt. So I drink Life Change Tea. It's an herbal drink, cleansing my body of toxic sludge and nasty chemicals, and of course, ridding the intruders that are hidden in my so-called food. And by the way, Life Change Tea is non-GMO and organic. No fillers, no yuck. Just a great defense against you-know-what. May the supplement force awaken you. Don't fall to the dark side. Sorry. I went to the movies last night. Anyway, enough said. How do you get that herbal drink and change your life? GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. You will awaken. You will get stronger, and you might even lose a bit of weight. So awaken to Life Change Tea and the many one-of-a-kind supplements at GetTheTea.com. That's GetTheTea.com. May the supplement force be with you.
Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities. Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities. Fentanyl. It could be hiding anywhere, including in your house, including in your medicine cabinet, or maybe at a friend's house when you're hanging out, playing games, and get offered a pill. Don't take chances. If a drug didn't come from a pharmacy directly to you, you can find fentanyl using a simple strip you can pick up at your local pharmacy. Don't take it until you test it, because fentanyl can be hiding anywhere. Brought to you by the Georgia Department of Behavioral Health and Mental Disabilities.